Hello everyone, we are going to create simple REST API using ASP.NET Core Web API 9 and Entity Framework Code first. And the result that we have in this tutorial is we're able to create a new menu. This is a restaurant menu. So we can just call it create new menu. And yeah, menu created successfully. And if we can get all the menu in database in here, the menu, this one we create in here, menu 2, this is description, and we can also search by ID. This one we can put ID is 4, yeah, we put here 4, and then get menu by ID. Nice, we found it. And also we can update this menu in here. We try to update the menu 4, and then I try to call this menu updated successfully. And if I try again, see, now the menu is changed to this one as we put in here, updated. And then we also able to delete it. So I try to remove menu ID 4 and send request, menu removed successfully. And if we try to see again, now it's so returning not found. Nice. Alright, let's start building this web API. Before we start, there is some requirement we need to have in our computer, and I have put this list also on description. So this is all the requirement that we need to do in this tutorial. We are using Visual Studio 2022, .NET 9, SQL Server Express, and then SQL Server Management Studio. All of this is free, and you can download it and install to your Windows PC. And if you already installed this old application, then we can continue to create our new project in Visual Studio 2022. I have opened Visual Studio 2022 in here, and then we can create a new project. And selecting the web API, we can search here web API, and then choosing the ASP.NET Core Web API with C# language. Okay, I double click and then enter the project name. We can put CRUD API. And the next, enter. Okay, and in here we are using a .NET 9. If you don't see this on your PC, it means that you are still not installing the .NET 9 SDK. So please download it, and I have put the link on description below. And for the other, you can just keep as it is, and we can create. Alright, our project created, and if you can see in here, there is already controller, weather forecast controller, and weather forecast in here. This is a sample web API that provided by Microsoft. So we don't need it for this tutorial, so I just remove it. I delete, and also this one. And we are going to use Entity Framework Core in our web API as a database framework to connecting to our SQL Server Express. And it means that we need to install these 3 packages. There's an Entity Framework Core, and because we are using a SQL Server, so we need to install this Entity Framework Core.SQL Server, and we need to add the Entity Framework Core tools in here to adding a migration or updating our database. Oh yeah, in here we are using Entity Framework Core code first, which means we are creating our table, database schema, anything from our API project. So after we creating the table in this project, we will synchronize it, and then it will automatically create it. Any changes we made in this project, example, we create a new table and then we sync it, and we're able to see the change automatically to our database without touching any SQL query like creating database or anything. That is an Entity Framework Core code first. Actually, there is another Entity Framework type, which is a DB first, which means we're creating a database first, we're creating a table first, any schema we need, and then there is a tools that help us to automatically generate that the table into code in our project. So there's a two-way, yeah, code first and database first. Right now in our project, we are going to use Entity Framework code first. Now to install it, we can just go to the project, right-click, manage Nugget package, and you can browse for the Entity Framework Core. Okay, in here we can install the Entity Framework Core, Entity Framework Core SQL Server, and tools. Okay, we can install it. The latest version is 9.0.5. Alright, done. After you install successfully, you will see there is a green checklist in here. So I installed the Entity Framework Core, SQL Server, dari checklist and tools. Nice. So we can close it now. We don't need it anymore. Okay, I think this one we can save. And then let's start creating our table. In here, I will add new folder, data access maybe. And in here, we will have a entity. And for the entity, we will create a new class. This is a menu class. Okay, inside our menu, in here we will have this property. So we will have 5 property or 5 column in our menu table. This is a table we will going to have later. And then the ID is key or primary key. We need to call this using a data annotation to use that. And then there is a name. And in here, name is a not null. We can define like this. So for description is nullable. So we add this, which is mean this is a nullable. And then there's a price using a float. And then a category also nullable string. And now we need to create an application DbContext in here. So I add new class application DbContext. And then calling a DbContext in here. Inherit from Entity Framework Core. And then I need to create a constructor, generate constructor. I click a ctrl and dot, so it show that menu. And then we need to define that this entity is our table. How to do that is we put like this, a public dbset menu, and then the table name is a menus, and get and set. It will tell Entity Framework that this entity is our table in our database. And then to connecting to our database, we need to put our connection string to address it to where our database located. In here, application string, in application setting.json, we can put connection string. And here, the connection name is a default connection. It's anything, you can put anything in there. You need to put this one. This is our server. We are using a SQL Server Express. And then this is our database name. We are going to create a database name CRUD operation. So if this database is not created yet, it's fine because Entity Framework will automatically create the database. But if there is database exists, then it will not creating a new database, but will update the database instead automatically. And then for integrated security, in here we set it true. We are logging to our SQL Server Express with our Windows account. Since this is a local database, so that's fine. And then we trust this certificate of our local host. Okay, after we set it, we go to the program.cs here to let Web API know that we are using an Entity Framework. Okay, we put in here builder services at DbContext, and we are using an application DbContext here. And then there is an option, and then we let there know that we are using a SQL Server. Okay, in here we are using SQL Server with connection builder configuration get connection string in here. Okay, close it first. We need to use exactly same name that we put in here. So I just copy and then paste into here to make sure there is no typo there. And finally, it's fine connecting to our database. And since we are using a Entity Framework code first, we need to create a migration. By doing this, Entity Framework will do searching any changes in our code that not implemented yet in our database. And because of that, Entity Framework will creating that script to create the table and database. So how that works? Yes, we can just go to the tools, Nugget Package Manager and Package Manager console. Usually there is a in here, and then you can just call add migration, and the name is anything. This one is initialization, and then enter. Now as you can see, there is a migration in here that we are creating a new table. This is a new table with this rule. The ID is a primary key, name is not null, nullable is false, yeah, you can see in here, and the description is nullable, price is a real or float, yeah, we have said before, and then the category is an varchar, and then nullable is true. So by this migration, later entity framework will generating the SQL query to generate the table. For database, I think there is no in here. It will still creating a database, new database, but there is no thing migration script that we can see in here. And this migration still not implemented yet. To implement it, we need to call update database in here again. And if example, some cases we want to revert the changes. We don't want to create this menus table. So what we do is we can just revert our migration and it will call this function. This will be undo what any change we have in here. And what it do is creating a table. So the revert should be drop the table. Okay, it's nice. So we do now is we update our database. Database. Okay, enter. Okay, you can see there is a script in here injecting to our database and done. Now we can check our database using SQL Server Management Studio. Alright, I have connecting to my SQL Server and then database, and we can see in here there is a CRUD operations database that we create using entity framework. And we see in here there is two tables. One is the table we create before, the menu. Yeah, we can see any column in here that should be same like we define. But there is another table in here, EF migration history. This is auto-generated table if you are using entity framework code first. In here we can see history of our migration. If you see the data in here, now it tells us that the migration that implemented to our database is this migration. So example, we create another table and then we add new migration again with the name, example, the name create table A. So if after we update the database, it will put the value into here as a row 2. And then we can keep on track of what migration we do actually. That is a good side of using a code first. So we can always see our history changes to our database. We can close it all and then close it. And I will create a new controller, selecting the API and API controller empty. And the name is a menu controller. And for controller, we are going to have this. This is a placeholder by me. So we will have a create, read. Yeah, there is two read. One is get all menu and the other is a get menu by ID. And then we put the ID in here. And then update and delete. And each of these have a different HTTP verbs. If you already learned about a REST API, so for creating we are going to use HTTP post, and for read we using a HTTP get, update we are using a put, and deleting we using a delete. Now let's starting by injecting our DbContext in here. Because this is a beginner tutorial, we are not using service in here, but we are doing any logic in this controller so it can be faster. And then, so yeah, I just creating a new constructor, ctor and tab, and then application DbContext, context, and then create and assign a field context. And then in here, for the parameter, we need to input menu. This is our entity. So when we creating, we need to provide the menu. And then what we should have is a context menus add menu. And we need to save the changes to our database. We need to call context save changes. And in here, we can detect if the changes successfully done or no in our database. How to do that is we tracking the how many changes implemented in our database. What is mean? So example, in this one we adding one row data. So we expect that this one should return integer. This should be integer result. So it should be returning 1, which means 1 changes implemented to our database. As you can see in here, it returning an integer, right? So if it return 1, it means there is 1 record inserted to our database. But if returning a less than 1, example 0, it means there is something wrong and we not saved this menu to our database. So to detect this, you can just if result is more than 0, then we return OK, and then we can put a menu created successfully, and else, no need to put else in here, but just a bad request. We are returning bad request if the result is 0 or less than 0. Now we move to the read, and for this one we getting all the menu, so we can just var result context menus and to list, and then by this it will populate all the data inside the menus table and then put here, and we will just return it. We will not detect if null or no, because if null we still returning OK, but with null data or empty data. Okay, it's fast, it's a simple changes. And now for get menu by ID. In here we put a parameter ID. So I want to put this one into the root instead. Which means now when we call the API slash menu slash 1, 1 is our ID. So how to do that? We can just put here like this, ID. So we will include the ID as a root. And we can just var result context menus find by ID in here. So it will checking any primary key that containing this ID we put here. And if the result is null, just returning the not found. But if we found this, we can just return OK with the value of menu we found in database. And then the next is update. For update, again we same like create, we need to put menu in here as a parameter. And then for updating, first we need to check if data is exist or no in our database. So I think we can just copy from here faster. And then menu ID. If result is null, we can return not found. But if result is not null, okay, this one is not correct. We are not going to implement that. But instead, context entry result, and then current values, we set values to our changes in parameter here. So by rec, this is will change current menu in database we found here to the data that we put in this parameter. But this one may be better current menu. Okay, I'm using a current menu. And then same as above, yeah, we save it. So I just have same code in here. I copy and paste it faster. And then if result is more than 0, then mean the menu updated successfully. And now for delete. Same as we get by ID, we have a ID parameter here. So what I do is I put this one and I paste it here. So we are going to use ID again in our root, and yeah, we can just copy here. Okay, this one I'm using an ID, and then if ID null, if the menu null, it's mean there's a not found, we return it. But if the current menu is exist, we can context menus remove function of current menu. And again, we need to save the changes. So you know what to do. Yeah, copy again from this menu, remove it successfully. Oops. Now done. all the endpoint created. And the next thing we will do is testing this endpoint. Okay, I'm going to use this .http to testing our API or endpoint. This one, okay, this is a default sample endpoint that created by Microsoft before. Okay, this one we can just remove it, or we can change lah to calling our API. API/menu. This is for get all menu. Why is missing? Okay, and if we try to send request, okay, we need to start it first. Okay, we can start it. Alright, it started, and now we can try send request in here, and we got the status okay, but there is no value. Okay, that's fine because we're not creating any menu yet in our database. So let's start creating a post or create new menu, and this one. So we are using a post HTTP verbs, and the endpoint is same API/menu. Okay, I have not tell you before that API is from here. This is API, and the slash is the controller. This is our controller name. It take from this. That's why we calling API/menu. And then in here we include the menu in here as parameter. If you remember, we put menu as parameter in here. Okay, name, description, price, and category. And we no need to put ID because ID will automatically generated by Entity Framework. So let's see, send request. And we can see menu created successfully. And if we see get all requests, and we will able to see all the ID. An example, if we want to create another lah, 2. This is description 2. And send request again, and I get all menu again. We can see 2 menu in here. Nice. Now I want to find menu by ID. So we can just copy get menu by ID and put ID in here. I want to show 2. So if I call this, I will see the menu with ID 2. Now we continue for the update. I just copy from here and paste here. Update menu. Okay, this is our update menu. So we are using put HTTP verbs. API/menu is still same, but in here we include the ID because we want to Entity Framework know this is the ID we want to update. And for the changes, I put this one, updated. So we should see this value instead of we see in here. So I try to update. Okay, menu updated successfully, and I try to get menu again by ID. Nice, we can see the menu is changed. Now the last we will do delete. Okay, we will have this delete menu by ID. We're using a delete HTTP verbs, and we put 2 as parameter, which means we want to delete menu 2. Okay, let's send request, and menu removed successfully. Nice. If we try to see again get menu by ID 2, we should getting a not found. Nice. And yeah, currently should be only 1 menu. Alright, nice. So in next tutorial, maybe I want to have a front end to calling this web API, maybe like Blazor, React, or Angular, any front end. So you can stay tuned to my channel and subscribe. If anything question you want to ask for me, you can comment below and I try my best to answer it. Thank you for watching and bye-bye.